South Central Los Angeles, summer of 1985, was a crucible of heat and desperation. The air was thick with the stench of asphalt and uncollected trash, and the wail of sirens was as constant as a heartbeat. Jamal Carter was born in a one-bedroom apartment on 47th Street, a roach-infested box where the walls were stained with despair. His mother, Letitia, was 16, a girl with a voice like Aretha Franklin's and dreams of stardom, now shackled to motherhood and a boyfriend, Dion, who sold crack to pay the bills. Dion was a phantom there one day, gone the next, leaving behind a .38 revolver and a trail of broken promises. Jamal's earliest memories were of absence. Letitia worked double shifts at a diner, leaving him with her cousin Shonda, who chain-smoked Newports and lived for soap operas. Food was scarce some nights. Jamal went to bed with nothing but tap water in his stomach. But his hunger ran deeper than that, a gnawing need for something he couldn't name. The projects were a labyrinth of concrete and violence, where hope was a myth and survival was the only currency. Kids ran wild, dodging bullets and social workers with equal agility. By 5, Jamal was a street rat, wandering with a chipped front tooth and a defiance that burned brighter than the LA sun. School was a war zone. Jamal was sharp. Teachers saw it in the way he tore through books when he bothered to show up, but he was also a problem. He fought anyone who mocked his hand-me-down clothes or called him poor. By 10, he was shoplifting candy bars from corner stores, not for the sugar, but for the thrill of taking something back from a world that gave him nothing. The streets were his real education, and the lessons were merciless: trust no one, fear nothing, always have a way out. At 13, Jamal was jumped into the 47th Street Bloods. It wasn't a choice, it was fate. South Central was a chessboard, and you were either a player or a pawn. His initiation was a brutal ritual in an alley behind a liquor store, 6 older boys pounding him until his vision blurred and his ribs screamed. When it was over, they handed him a red bandana and a blunt. He choked on the smoke but tied the bandana around his head like a crown. The Bloods gave Jamal what his life lacked: a tribe, a purpose, a code. His mentor was Trey, a wiry 20-year-old with a teardrop tattoo and a rap sheet that read like a novel. Trey taught him the game: how to sling dope, spot an undercover, fire a Glock without flinching. Jamal was a natural, fearless, quick, and loyal. By 14, he was running corners, stashing cash in his socks, and dodging bullets like it was a game of dodgeball. The money was good, better than any job a kid like him could dream of. He bought Letitia a used TV, paid off her overdue rent, and still had enough for fresh Jordans and a gold chain. The respect was even better. In the projects, Jamal was somebody. But the streets were a slaughterhouse. Friends fell like dominoes. Lil Mike caught a bullet over a dice game, DD overdosed on fentanyl-laced heroin. Letitia begged him to get out, her voice hoarse from tears, but Jamal was hooked. The game was his oxygen. Jamal was 15 when the world broke. It was a humid night in 2000, the kind where the air clung to your skin like a bad memory. He'd been out late, moving product for Trey, when he got a call from Shonda. Her voice was a scream: "Get home, Jamal. It's your mama." He ran, heart pounding, through streets alive with the hum of danger. When he reached the apartment, the door was ajar, the lock splintered. Inside, the world stopped. Letitia lay on the living room floor, her body twisted, blood pooling beneath her. Her eyes, once so full of fire, stared blankly at the ceiling. A syringe dangled from her arm, and 2 men dealers Jamal recognized from the block stood over her, arguing in hushed tones. They sold her a bad batch, laced with something that killed her before she could scream. Jamal froze, his breath caught in his throat. One of the dealers, a pockmarked guy called Rico, saw him and sneered. "Kid, you don't want this smoke. Walk away." But Jamal couldn't move. Rage erupted inside him, a volcano of grief and fury. He lunged, tackling Rico, clawing at his face. The second dealer pulled him off, slamming him against the wall. They beat him until he tasted blood, then fled into the night. When the cops came, they didn't care about justice. They saw a dead junkie and a black kid with a record. They wrote it off as an overdose, case closed. But Jamal knew the truth. Those dealers had killed his mother, and the system let them walk. That night, something died in him: his innocence, his trust, his fear. In its place, a fire was born, a vow etched into his soul: he would burn the drug trade to the ground. Jamal's grief was a blade, sharpening his every move. He was still a blood, still Trey's right hand, but his mission was his own. He started small, targeting the low-level pushers who worked Rico's crew. He'd ambush them in alleys, beat them bloody, and flush their stashes down storm drains. Word spread, J-Blaze was coming for the dope game. At 16, he was a phantom, striking fast and vanishing. He learned to blend into shadows, to listen to the street's whispers. He stole ledgers from stash houses, tipped off cops to rival operations, and sabotaged deals. But he was careful, never touching the drugs himself, never crossing Trey. The Bloods didn't care about his crusade as long as he kept the cash flowing. His reputation grew, and so did his enemies. Rico, now a mid-level kingpin, put a price on Jamal's head. The Crips, sensing weakness, started circling. Jamal slept with his Glock under his pillow, his dreams haunted by Letitia's lifeless eyes. He was winning battles, but the war was endless. Every dealer he took down was replaced by two more, and the streets were hungrier than ever. Trey tried to pull him back. "You can't save the world, Jay," he said one night, passing him a beer. "You're gonna get yourself killed." But Jamal couldn't stop. His mother's blood demanded it. He was 17 when he tracked Rico to a warehouse in Compton. He went in alone, armed with a 9mm and a Molotov cocktail. The fight was chaos: gunshots, screams, flames licking the walls. Jamal put 2 bullets in Rico's chest, but not before taking a knife to the ribs. He barely made it out, collapsing in an alley as sirens closed in. Jamal's war made him a legend, but legends don't last. At 18, he was betrayed. A deal went south, set up by a snitch in his own crew. The buyer was an informant, the meetup a sting. Jamal shot his way out, clipping a cop in the leg. He was arrested 3 days later, sold out by a cousin desperate for bail money. The trial was a formality: attempted murder of a police officer, drug trafficking, illegal firearms. At 19, Jamal was sentenced to 15 years in Folsom State Prison. Prison was a different kind of hell. Jamal's rep as J-Blaze made him a target. Rival gang members came for him in the yard, shanks flashing. He fought back, earning scars and respect. The days were a gray blur of lockdowns, rancid food, and whispered deals. Letitia's memory was his anchor, her face the only thing keeping him from breaking. But even in Folsom, the fire burned. Jamal refused to join the prison gangs, a choice that cost him blood. He spent months in solitary, the darkness clawing at his mind. There, he started writing first letters to Letitia, then poems, then stories. A prison librarian, Mr. Evans, saw his potential and slipped him books, Malcolm X, Angela Davis, James Baldwin. Jamal read them by the light of a smuggled bulb, the words cracking open his world. He saw his life as a story, not just a series of traps. 7 years into his sentence, Jamal got a letter from Trey. His old mentor was out, working at a youth center in Watts, trying to go straight. The letter was short but piercing. "You're bigger than this, Jay, don't let the streets bury you." It was a mirror, forcing Jamal to face himself. He'd spent years blaming the world, his father, the cops, the system, but Trey's words shifted something. Revenge wasn't enough. Letitia deserved more than a son who died for her. Jamal enrolled in a GED program, acing it in months. He took college courses through a prison outreach, studying sociology, history, and creative writing. He joined a restorative justice group, sitting in circles with other inmates, peeling back layers of pain. It was brutal, confronting the lives he'd ruined, the blood on his hands. But it was also a lifeline. He wrote a memoir, Born in the Shadows, raw and unfiltered, about his life, his mother, his war. Mr. Evans sent it to a publisher, who called it a voice that cuts like a knife. In 2020, at 26, Jamal was paroled. He walked out of Folsom with a duffel bag, a manuscript, and a new mission, to honor Letitia by saving others from the streets that killed her. Los Angeles was the same sirens, same hustle, but Jamal was different. He moved in with his Aunt Shonda, who cried when she saw him, and got a job at Trey's youth center. The kids there were mirrors of his younger self, angry, lost, hungry. He told them his story, not to glorify it, but to show the cost. Freedom wasn't what Jamal expected. He'd imagined walking out of Folsom into a world ready to embrace him, but Los Angeles in 2010 was a city that didn't forget. His parole papers were a leash, weekly check-ins, random drug tests, a curfew that made him feel like a kid again. Worse was the scarlet letter of his criminal record, a shadow that followed him everywhere. Jobs were scarce for a felon, even one with a GED and college credits. The youth center gig with Trey was a lifeline, but it paid barely enough to cover rent and diapers. Keisha's salary kept them afloat, but Jamal hated leaning on her. He'd been a kingpin once, now he was scraping by, counting pennies for Hope's formula. The streets hadn't changed. South Central was still a war zone, with new gangs and new drugs. Meth and fentanyl now ruled where crack once reigned. Old homies from the 47th Street blood still lurked, some offering respect, others resentment. "Jay Blaze, you went soft," a kid named D-Money spat one day, leaning against a bodega wall. Jamal ignored him, but the words stung. He wasn't soft, he was trying to be something better. But the streets didn't care about redemption arcs. His memoir's success brought attention, but not always the good kind. Online, he was a hero to some, a thug to others. Comment sections tore him apart, "Just another gangbanger pretending to be reformed," one read. Speaking gigs at schools were a high, but they were sporadic, and some principals hesitated, wary of his past. "We love your story," one told him, "but parents might not." Jamal swallowed the rejection, but it burned. At home, things were tense. Keisha was his rock, but she was human. Her job at a nonprofit was grueling, and coming home to a husband haunted by nightmares didn't help. Jamal tried to shield her, but his silences spoke louder than words. Hope was their light, a giggling toddler who made everything worth it, but even she couldn't erase the strain. Bills piled up, and the apartment they rented in Inglewood was a step up from the projects but still had leaky pipes and neighbors who blasted music all night. Jamal felt the walls closing in, the same suffocation he'd known as a kid. Jamal threw himself into the youth center, determined to make a dent. The kids there were raw, angry boys with knives in their socks, girls with eyes older than their years. They reminded him of himself at 15, burning with rage and nowhere to aim it. He didn't sugarcoat his story when he talked to them. "I thought I was a king," he'd say, holding up his memoir like a warning. But kings in the streets end up dead or caged. Some listened, some didn't, but he kept at it, hauling them to basketball courts, teaching them to write their pain into words, anything to keep them off the corners. Trey was his partner in the fight, but even he was struggling. The center was underfunded, always one grant away from closing. They stretched every dollar, but the building was falling apart, broken windows, no AC, a roof that leaked in the rain. Jamal started hustling for donations, cold calling businesses, pitching to churches. Most hung up, but a few listened, and he scraped together enough to keep the lights on. It was a grind, and it reminded him of slinging dope, only now the stakes were higher, and the payoff was saving lives. His memoir opened doors, but they were narrow. A local TV station did a segment on him, calling him the voice of the streets turned advocate. It felt good until the hate mail came, letters calling him a fraud, a snitch, a sellout. One night, someone spray-painted traitor on his car. Keisha wanted to call the cops, but Jamal stopped her. "They won't care," he said, scrubbing the paint off at 2 a.m. He didn't tell her how much it shook him, how it made him question if he was betraying the code he'd once lived by. The criminal record was a constant hurdle. He applied for a part-time teaching job at a community college, thinking his sociology credits and story might sway them. The interview went well until the background check. "We can't take the risk," the dean said, avoiding his eyes. Jamal nodded, but inside, he was screaming. He wanted to provide for Hope, to give her the life he never had, but every step forward felt like wading through mud. The past wasn't done with Jamal. In 2016, a ghost walked back into his life, D-Money, now a shot caller for the Bloods. He showed up at the youth center, all gold teeth and menace, offering Jamal a deal. "We need a connect with the kids," D-Money said, leaning too close. "You get us in, we cut you in. Easy money." Jamal's blood went cold. It was the same pitch he'd heard at 13, the one that had pulled him into the game. He refused, but D-Money didn't take no lightly. The center started getting vandalized, smashed windows, slashed tires on Trey's car. One night, Jamal found a note taped to the door, "Stay in your lane, J Blaze." Keisha begged him to move, to leave LA, but Jamal couldn't. The kids needed him, and running felt like letting Letitia down. He installed cameras, started locking the center at night, but the fear crept in, a familiar weight from his street days. His parole officer, a hard-ass named Rodriguez, wasn't helping. Every missed curfew, every late check-in, was a strike. "You're one slip from going back," Rodriguez warned, flipping through Jamal's file. The threat hung over him, a guillotine waiting to drop. He was clean, no drugs, no guns, but the system didn't care. To them, he was still J Blaze, the kid who shot at cops. At home, the tension boiled over. Keisha found him one night, staring at Hope's crib, his fists clenched. "Talk to me, Jamal," she said, her voice soft but firm. He didn't want to unload, didn't want to burden her, but the words spilled out fear of failing, hope, of losing the center, of the streets pulling him back. She held him, her strength anchoring him, but he knew she was tired too. They were a team, but teams could break. By 2020, the youth center was on its last legs. A major donor pulled out, citing community concerns about Jamal's past. Trey was ready to throw in the towel, his own demons, years of guilt from the streets wearing him down. Jamal refused to quit. He started a crowdfunding campaign, pouring his story into social media, begging for help. The response was mixed. Some donated, moved by his redemption, others trolled, calling him a con artist. He raised enough to keep the doors open, but barely. Then came the raid. Rodriguez, acting on an anonymous tip, showed up with cops, tearing the center apart. They found nothing, no drugs, no weapons, but the damage was done. Kids stopped coming, scared off by the police presence. Parents pulled their teens, whispering about Jamal's record. The center, his sanctuary, felt like a graveyard. That night, Jamal hit rock bottom. He sat in the dark, a bottle of cheap whiskey in hand, something he hadn't touched since prison. He didn't drink, just stared at it, tempted to numb the pain. Keisha found him, took the bottle, and sat beside him. "You're not alone," she said, her voice cutting through his fog. "But you gotta let me in." He broke then, sobbing like he hadn't since Letitia died. He told her everything, the fear, the shame, the feeling that he'd never outrun Jay Blaze. Keisha didn't flinch. She made a plan, therapy for both of them, a budget to stretch their money, a vow to fight for the center. Jamal resisted therapy at first. Talking to a stranger felt weak, but Keisha insisted. The therapist, a black woman named Dr. Harris, got it. She'd grown up in Compton, knew the streets pull. She helped Jamal unpack his trauma, from Letitia's murder to the guilt of the lives he'd taken in his war on dealers. It wasn't a cure, but it was a start. Therapy gave Jamal clarity. He couldn't erase his past, but he could use it. He leaned harder into his advocacy, partnering with anti-drug coalitions across LA. He spoke at city council meetings, his voice steady as he pushed for funding for rehab programs and job training for ex-cons. His criminal record was still a barrier, but he turned it into a badge, proof he'd survived the system and could help others do the same. The youth center became his proving ground. He and Trey rebuilt, one step at a time. They recruited volunteers, ex-gang members, social workers, even a retired cop who believed in second chances. They expanded programs, coding classes, art workshops, a poetry slam that drew kids from across South Central. Jamal's memoir became required reading, not just for the kids but for their parents, who saw their own struggles in his story. D-money was still a problem, but Jamal outsmarted him. He worked with a community watch group, documenting the Bloods' moves, feeding tips to a detective who wasn't in the gang's pocket. When D-money got busted for trafficking, it wasn't Jamal's name on the report, but he felt the win. The streets noticed, and the vandalism stopped. The center was safe again, a beacon in the chaos. At home, things healed slowly. Therapy helped Jamal and Keisha communicate, to share the load. Hope was growing fast, a whirlwind of questions and laughter. Jamal read to her every night, stories of heroes who rose from nothing. He wanted her to know she could be anything, that her father's past wouldn't define her. By 2023, Jamal was 35, and the youth center was thriving. Grants came in, not just from locals but from national foundations moved by his story. The center expanded, adding a computer lab and a music studio. Jamal's memoir was in its fifth printing, translated into Spanish and taught in schools from LA to Chicago. He was a regular on podcasts, a voice for the voiceless, but he never forgot the streets. Every dollar he earned went back into South Central scholarships, rehab beds, job fairs. His criminal record still haunted him. Some doors corporate jobs, certain grants stayed closed. But he learned to navigate the system, to find allies who saw his worth. He mentored ex-cons, helping them expunge records, find work, rebuild. "You're not your worst day," he'd tell them, echoing what Keisha had told him. The nightmares never fully left, but they were quieter now. Letitia's memory was his fuel, not his chain. He visited her grave every year, telling her about hope, about the kids he'd saved, about the man he'd become. He imagined her smiling, her voice saying, "I'm proud, baby." Jamal's life wasn't a fairy tale. Money was still tight, the streets still dangerous, the system still broken. But he had Keisha, hope, and a purpose that burned brighter than any gang bandana. He fought for his redemption, and he won not just for himself, but for every kid who saw his story and believed they could write a new ending.